Good morning, everyone. This is going to be a little bit of a special wake up with Workday asynchronous episode. Having some streaming issues, but we'll be back at it tomorrow on Friday, March 13th. So, going to go over my existing workflow with the way I use agents. So, I think the most important thing here is it's very similar to the software development lifecycle that kind of I've always followed as a developer, but with some minor tweaks and a lot less humans dealing with stuff. So let's kind of go through it. So to start off, planning obviously has to be the first step to really anything. You can't just go out there and build. You can try to build with whatever, just kind of spit your three sentence idea into an agent and see what it gives you. It's going to be a lot less detailed, and it's going to guess in a lot of different ways that is inevitably going to hurt you in the long run. So I like to start with that planning. Obviously, I usually use the just regular old Claude chat. So I'll just brain dump a really long idea, my idea of the scope, the tech stack, all the features, as much information that I can really give the agent up front, the better. So it's going to create me a big detailed design off of that, and then I want to iterate on top of that as well. So it does kind of eliminate that analysis pattern as well here. So when you dump all that in there, it's going to do the analysis for you. So my plan step is kind of the plan and analysis step all rolled into one, because the agent is doing that analysis for me, determining tech stacks and packages and feasibility and CLIs and MCP servers that I might need to use. So it's doing that analysis for me by me doing the planning piece. And then once I dump my design document into a loop, so that's kind of where I determine like my design. I actually just did this last night on another side project I was doing, and it turned a little 100-line detailed design that I got from my plan step into a design document that's over 6,000 lines long. So I looked it over this morning briefly, and it's quite detailed. And it got to a point where it kind of marked the detailed design as finished. So, and I think I'll go over that in another video, is kind of my prompt and process in that actual loop of creating incredibly detailed design documents. So essentially it looped every 15 minutes over this document, had some additional skills and a persona around what it was trying to do. But essentially loops, what they do is they'll go in, read what happened, usually analyze some sort of markdown file on top of that. If it's attempting to adjust a feature or whatnot, it will look through your code base, and then it will try to use whatever tools it can. And then if there's no tools for it to use, then it will actually break the loop and finish. And it actually got to that point overnight. I'd have to look to see how many iterations it actually went through over my detailed design document, where it actually marked it as, I think this is a complete document, which I'm not even sure. I wasn't even sure it was going to hit that point. But the loops do get to a point where it's like, all right, there's no tools being used. I think this is finished. And then it actually asked me, and it kept iterating over itself. Do you want to keep this loop? There's no additional work that I have found that needs to be done. So now we can move on to the development phase, as after you've reviewed that design document, you're happy with what features are going to be created, you're happy with, the overall tech stack and all that good stuff. Then you can get to the actual building. So you feed it into an agent team, and this is where more and more skills and agents being defined in your process really help out here, because as you define more guardrails for your agents, it's going to be able to utilize your tokens better. It's going to be able to output better results, and be able to essentially create what you want in a much faster, more efficient fashion to be able to, use your usage in a more useful way. So once it creates what it needs to, again, I use loops on development items as well. Create that loop, be very specific in your prompt, and use those agent teams that are able to essentially talk to each other while they're building. So it builds test cases, builds the development features, builds the UI in the background, and is able to actually review the code after it's been built by itself and create bugs. So while the testing part is also important, where you're inevitably gonna find bugs that the LLMs create, you can get a jump start on that by sending an agent against its own code base to review it and see if it can find any bugs before you get to testing. And this is the big human in the loop part that is still, I think, kind of the most important piece of any agentic workflow. Is you need to have that human going in there, testing, making sure everything's still functioning, making sure no weird bugs are happening, no weird security flaws are being presented. You really need to be that good tester in this particular loop. So I've always thought testing was super important. The development teams that I've been on that are test driven are one of the more robust and cleanest code bases that I've worked with. So be very, very diligent with your tests. Be diligent with your test cases too. So when you're developing things, even when you're sicking it with the teams to do it, have a test agent create test cases before the developers get in there to start building, and have them build off of those test cases. So you'll have just better outcomes in the overall process. And then once you've tested and you find issues, document those issues, create another document for bugs to fix, and then the loop starts over again. So you plan over what needs to be fixed, what's not working, and then cycle through that design, develop, test process until you're happy with the product that's kind of coming out of it. All right, and some other things I want to just point out as far as some tips that I use along the way here. Agent definitions, yeah, definitely use agents. This isn't just the agents themselves. This isn't Claude Code. This isn't Cursor. This is agents within your Claude setup. So you can do this in Claude. You can do rules in Cursor. You can do very similar things in Gemini as well. But again, skills and agents, very, very important. It is able to give those guardrails and guidelines to your agents to be able to make informed decisions before they have to do, guesswork on their side. It's going to save you more tokens. It's going to give you better output. Using agent teams on the more complex work. Again, if you sick an agent team on a very simple bug fix, it's going to spin up 3 different agents. It's going to burn through a lot of tokens just doing simple stuff. This also goes back to the idea of don't use the biggest frontier models for every single task. And that's why leaving Cursor on auto, or leaving your Claude Code in medium mode. So by default, Claude is set to medium. The medium effort, you can jack it up to high when you need to do those more complex work. But you don't always have to use the biggest thinking model to achieve your task that you're trying to do. So just be cognizant of using agent teams that, they might do a little bit better job on even the smaller fixes, but do you really need to waste all that time and, token usage on smaller fixes? Let's see here. Utilizing loops to iterate on long repetitive tasks. Yeah, so this is really good, again, for doing that iterative detailed design document, doing those longer feature builds. So when you have, a big 5,000 line detailed design document, have your agent team every 15 minutes look over and, do 5 to 6 different tasks. in that, in that detailed design document. You don't have to stick it against the entire the entire document at once, and then that gives you the opportunity to be that human in the loop, to see, the iterative process of what it's creating. Can you test it? Is it, going off the rails here and doing something you're not supposed to be doing? And a neat thing that now you can do in Claude Code while it's working, this thing is actually building me something else in my hackathon app, but while it's going, you can now do BTW, and you can ask a quick side question while it's working. So if you have a long running process, it's going for 10-20 minutes before it stops, you can ask a quick question here and not interrupt the process or have to spin up another terminal. So pretty handy way to get a little bit more context or add a little bit additional information into your workflows there too. Next here we have, again, leveraging those different models. I use a multitude of models and a multitude of models within the LLM. So, keep Cursor on auto in my mind. I think it is really good at picking the proper model for the proper, whatever you're trying to do. And then Gemini is kind of the industry leader at the moment for asset creation. So when you're generating images, videos, not so much, but there's a lot of different video creation tools out there. Higgsfield's a really big one for all those social media posts, and Claude's pretty dominant in the coding space right now. When your agents make mistakes, which inevitably they'll do things you don't want them to do. You'll have to reprompt, you'll have to ask them to do different things. Tell them to avoid those pitfalls and create rules around avoiding those pitfalls. So either have them update the skills, update the agents that they're running on, the little sub-agent files, update the rules within Cursor, update the rules within your Claude Markdown file. So it's able to keep that context around what you're trying to build and how you want it to be built and what you want it to avoid in the future. So it'll save you from extra rework. It's going to save your token usage. It's going to just overall make it a better agent experience for you going through this big loop. And then here's my just recommendations is when it comes to accessing basically data anywhere. So CLIs are kind of the gold standard in my opinion for just getting things done outside of your direct app. So when you want to connect to Notebook LLM, you want to connect to Workday, you want to connect to Salesforce, use a CLI before you go to anything else, because a CLI is that command line interface that these LLMs work with very well, and they're very well defined, very well guardrailed. So in my opinion, CLIs are great for basically handling anything that can be handled via CLI. Next is going to be your MCP servers. So this is, again, that model context protocol that's become very popular with agents. I tend to only use ones that are developed by the actual systems that they're supposed to be for. I'm not a huge fan of using MCP open source at the moment, just because there is a lot of security risk there. There's a lot of, description, malware baked into those things that people can sneak in very easily if the open source community is not well managed. So just be very, very cautious of the MCP servers you use. There's lots of horror stories out there right now of these being kind of the back door into a lot of the agent workflows. After that, using direct web services is kind of the next thing that I tend to lean into. So if I can't find an MCP server that's built by the software themselves that I'm trying to access, then I'll see if just I can hit the APIs directly. And then if not, if necessary, do your research. Don't just jump into the first MCP you find that's open source. Look into the open source software, sift through the code, make sure nothing fishy is going on, make sure it's well used, make sure there's a lot of good ratings. Do your due diligence when it comes to using any open source software, but especially when you're using any open source MCPs. And that's kind of the long and the short of what I do today. This is an evolving process. Like, we're all kind of learning how we do things every single day. These agent LLMs are evolving very fast. Looping and all this is all very new. Skills have just gotten a big bump with their new skill creator. We're learning a lot here. We're learning a lot fast. So let's all just try to keep up and build the coolest stuff. Thank you guys, and we'll see you at the next one.